in the opening, there is no chance this case can go to trial before the November election, because whatever Judge Chutkan decides in terms of what she views in bounds, what are official acts and what were presidential acts, that can be appealed pre-trial all the way to the Supreme Court. So there's no way that process plays out before the election. But in terms of scheduling, it's important because it may dictate how much of the evidence, how many hearings we'll have on the evidence in this case before the election, and even after the election if Mr. Trump wins, because the Justice Department will continue with this prosecution until the moment he takes office, if he wins. And the first dispute is about what issues come before the judge first. Donald Trump's lawyers want the judge to take up the question of, was Jack Smith appointed illegally, as Judge Eileen Cannon ruled down in Florida? Remember, she dismissed that separate classified documents case on the grounds that the special counsel appointment was illegal and unconstitutional. And so Donald Trump's lawyers want Judge Chutkan here to hear that issue and decide on it. That seems like a remote possibility because the law in this circuit clearly suggests that Judge Cannon's decision was wrong. And it's not just district judges that have ruled that way. The appeals court has ruled that way also. So what Jack Smith wants Judge Chutkan to do is immediately go to the issue of what are presidential acts and whether this new superseding indictment that Jack Smith filed, whether that can pass muster, because he's purged it of what he views are official acts under the Supreme Court ruling. But of course, Donald Trump's lawyers disagree, and they're going to argue that a lot of the conduct he's still alleging in this case should be out of bounds. And so that's the main dispute. Today's really about scheduling. The lawyers are in the courtroom. Donald Trump is not here. The lawyers will, though, enter a plea of not guilty to this new superseding indictment, which, again, contains no new allegations. It merely narrows it down. And so we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting day.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Stay with me. We do have an update from the courtroom. Chutkan is on the bench. Court is in session, and because it's federal court, no cameras in the courtroom, but we are continuing to report out what happens there. So Christy, Judge Chutkan had quite a bit of a waiting period here as she waited for the Supreme Court to make this decision on presidential immunity. How do you see this case moving forward, and what will you be watching for specifically today?
So I think Judge Chutkan is going to have no time for any of the delay tactics that Trump is proposing in this report. As Ken said, he doesn't even want to get to immunity. Before it was immunity, I have immunity, I have immunity. Now I don't even want to brief that. I want to talk about why the special counsel shouldn't be here, which the Supreme Court has said in its opinion, you got to deal with these immunity issues at the outset of the litigation. They were pretty clear about that. So Judge Chutkan is going to look to get back to business right away. And I think she's also going to be skeptical because Judge Trump could have made that argument about the special counsel way back when he was making the immunity arguments. And he didn't, because as Ken said, the law in the circuit is so clear that there's no argument there. I also think she's going to be very skeptical of his arguments regarding the immunity litigation. He's saying we can't get to briefing for months because I need all this discovery. Look for Jack Smith to say, you have it, let's get started. Let's get to the briefing. I think she will absolutely be no nonsense, look to get this on track quickly.
Barb, there was this superseding indictment after the immunity decision. How strong is this case after the Supreme Court's decision?
Oh, it's plenty strong, Anna. You know, I think that the main allegation that has been removed was Trump's alleged efforts to abuse the Justice Department as part of this whole plot. Personally, as a former DOJ employee, I found that among the most egregious of the charges. But it doesn't really diminish what's left, which is pressuring state legislators, fake slates of electors, and exploiting the chaos at the Capitol to pressure members of Congress to continue to block certification. All of that remains in the case. I also think it's noteworthy that some of the language was changed to reflect a different Supreme Court case, another case called Fisher, where the Supreme Court said to obstruct an official proceeding, it must involve documents. And so this new superseding indictment points out that it's all about the document. It's about the slates of electors, the ballots that are kept in the big mahogany box that was carefully safeguarded by staffers during the chaos at the Capitol. So the case remains strong, and I think Jack Smith is itching to go.
I'm just looking at what's happening right now inside the courtroom, and Chutkan did actually start out making a joke with Donald Trump's lawyers, noting that he looked rested. It had been almost a year since they had seen each other, and so she said, "You look rested," and as he introduced himself and joked, telling him to kind of enjoy it while it lasts. Ken, you talked about how because of the delay and sort of the backlog of decisions that have to happen before this can go to trial, where does this case go next?
Well, it depends on what Judge Chutkan rules today. If, as we all believe, she's interested in expediting and getting things moving, presumably there could be a hearing or a series of hearings examining this question of what evidence should be in bounds here, what are official acts and what aren't official acts. And that's consequential because that may require a lot of evidence to be put in front of the American public that those who haven't read the indictment aren't familiar with. In the middle of an election campaign, we're going to hear more about how Donald Trump tried to stay in power by allegedly conspiring to violate the law, to deprive millions of Americans of their right to vote, to obstruct Congress. So that could be a big deal. It could all transpire in this courthouse behind us before November.
Christy, the Trump legal team's strategy has been delay, 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 but Judge Chutkan did tell Trump's lawyers last October to sort of set the tone for how she wants to approach this. This trial will not yield to the election cycle. Already today, she's saying she won't make a ruling on the schedule, but she is also saying she hopes to get an order out later today. So that also indicates she wants to move swiftly. Realistically, how quickly could this move?
So I think first and foremost, you're going to see briefing, right? That is what the special counsel has requested. They said, we're ready to go, Judge Chutkan. Anytime you tell us to, we will file this brief explaining our indictment, why it's justified, why the Supreme Court's opinion does not affect any of the acts that we've alleged here in this indictment as criminal. And so I think she'll set a quick schedule for that briefing to occur. And then the real question will be whether or not, as Ken said, those hearings happen before the election. I think the briefing will take some time. It's going to be pretty fact intensive. And so, I think given that there's been some delay in getting to this conference, initially it was supposed to be in August and now we're in September, I'm a bit skeptical we'll get those hearings before the election, but the briefing is going to be substantial. There is going to be a lot of facts laid out there. And so even if we don't get to those hearings before the election, I do think there's going to be a lot for the American people to learn from Jack Smith's briefing.
And they have this new superseding indictment that's come between that decision and today's hearing. And they're going to be talking about that. She did just accept the not guilty plea entered on behalf of Donald Trump's team. Barbara, the Times had pointed out that soon after the indictment was returned to Judge Chutkan following the Supreme Court ruling, she told Trump that when he was in her courtroom, she planned to look on him as a criminal defendant, not as a former president. As for the fact that he was running for office again, that, she said, somewhat dismissively, was his day job. What do you take from that?
Yeah, I think that really sends a very important message that no one is above the law. You can't get out of a criminal trial simply because you're running for president. Otherwise, anyone would simply announce their candidacy and thereby be able to divert their criminal charges. But I do think it means she's going to push forward. We are going to see those briefs. Some have suggested that there might be a mini trial where we hear live testimony. I'd be surprised that's the case. I don't think either party wants that. It's not a terribly efficient way to proceed. But I do think we are going to get briefs that spell out in detail the allegations and the evidence. The other thing Donald Trump has requested because of his candidacy is that these briefs be filed under seals so that the American people do not see these damaging allegations and evidence. But I think going back to those words of Judge Chutkan, she is unlikely to grant that because there is a presumption that documents that are filed in court are to be unsealed and in the public domain. And so if she's to treat Donald Trump like every other defendant, then I think we will see these briefs in their full glory.
Ken, we're just about 10 minutes into this hearing. Seems to be moving pretty quickly.
It's Judge Chutkan for you. She does not fool around. She is the exact opposite of Judge Eileen Cannon, who ponders and mulls and questions every move by the lawyers and every brief before her. Judge Chutkan keeps things moving in her courtroom. And so we could be done with this hearing before we thought on it.
And Christy, assuming no trial before the election, just remind us, what happens to this case if Trump is elected? And what happens if he isn't elected?
If Trump is elected, this case goes away. He will direct his Department of Justice to dismiss the charges against him. So if he's elected, we're done here. And that is the same with the Florida case. He will direct his Department of Justice to drop any appeal there. If Kamala Harris is elected, this case will continue. She presumably will have her Department of Justice, continue with this case. There's a new attorney general. Presumably that attorney general will understand and appreciate the importance of both of these cases and stay the course.
All right. Thank you so much, Ken Delaney, Barbara McQuaid, and Christy Greenberg. Please stay close to the campaign trail next. The high-profile Republican officially backing Kamala Harris and her message to fellow members of the GOP about the stakes of this election. Plus, mounting pressure for a ceasefire deal. But are Netanyahu's public messages causing new confusion? But first, when we're back in just 90 seconds, new details on the tragic mass shooting at a Georgia high school. The shooter known to law enforcement. The latest from a community in mourning.
If something like this can happen here when you think it's a normal day, it can happen anywhere.
You were diagnosed with thyroid eye disease a long time ago. And year after year, you weathered the storm and just lived with the damage that was left behind. But even after all this time, your thyroid eye disease could still change. Restoration is still possible. Learn how you could give your eyes a fresh start at TEDhelp.com.
Honey?
But the gains are pumping.
Yeah, the market's closed.
Futures don't sleep in the after hours, bro.
Dad, is Mommy a finance bro?
She switched careers to make money for your weddings.
Ooh, penny stocks are blowing up. Sweetie, grab your piggy bank. We're going all in. Let me ask you, for your wedding, do you want a gazebo in a river?
What's a gazebo?
Something that your mother always wanted and never got.
Or you could give these different investment options a shot.
The right money moves aren't as aggressive as you think.
I'm keeping the best.
Negra, I want to be an actor.
So why don't you act like a good sister and get me some more of those baby back ribs?
I want to be a director now. Let's try a scene where you go get your own. And action.
And cut.
A lot of drama on this set.
Action.
And cut.
Maybe I'll just go get wings for everybody.
Borderie ships the only fully arranged cheese and charcuterie boards nationwide, so you can send the perfect birthday gift, customizable with any age, shipped to your door. With boards for every occasion, Borderie is guaranteed to impress. Send the perfect gift at Borderie.com.
I saw a deceased body on the floor, but it was like covered up, and I saw a female with a shot wound to her leg, and it was just like really traumatic. No matter if there's like cops in the school, there's still no safety at all.
That was a high school sophomore describing the moment she emerged from her classroom just 24 hours ago after she and her terrified classmates hid from a shooter opening fire in their Georgia school. 2 of her classmates and 2 teachers are now dead and 9 others injured. And the 14-year-old suspect is set to be charged as an adult. NBC's Jesse Kirsch is on the ground in Winder, Georgia. Jesse, what more are we learning about how this all went down?
Yeah, so Anna, what we're told is yesterday morning, gunshots rang out at Appalachia High School behind me here, and authorities tell us that in the process, 4 people were killed, 2 of them 14-year-old students. The other 2 people killed were teachers, and we're told additionally 9 people were shot and are recovering from their injuries, and we are told by authorities that the 9 people injured by gunfire are expected to survive, which is some hopeful news amidst all of this tragedy. According to authorities, the suspect in this incident surrendered when he was confronted by authorities. He is now in custody, and we're told that at the facility where he is, the first thing he would be going through is a mental and physical evaluation. That's among the first things he will be going through. It's unclear where he is in that intake process at this point. We're learning more about this suspect as well, Anna. His name is Colt Gray, 14 years old, a student at this school, according to authorities, who, as you mentioned, is expected to be tried as an adult, even though he is 14 years old in the aftermath of this deadly shooting, Anna.
We know this suspect was interviewed by law enforcement in relation to those online threats in May of 2023. What are we learning about how that unfolded and what came of that investigation?
Yeah, so we now have an incident report from that series of events over a year ago, Anna. And according to this incident report, I'm going to read a portion of this for you now. We're going to put it up on screen. Authorities in this report say Colt, and that, again, is the suspect in this deadly shooting. Colt assured me that he never made any threats to shoot up any school. I urged Colin, that is the boy's father, to keep his firearms locked away, and he advised him to keep Colt out of school until this matter could be resolved. The father, according to this report, said that school was already out for the year at this point. And according to authorities, they have said multiple times now, there was not probable cause for an arrest in that incident more than a year ago. Fast forward to yesterday, Anna, and now we have 4 people who are dead, 9 more shot and injured, according to authorities, and we're told this was all involving an AR-style weapon. So, of course, questions remain about how that weapon got in the boy's possession, allegedly how it got into the school, and how it led up to what is now a horrific incident in yet another American community, Anna.
Yeah, another American tragedy. Jesse Kirsch, thanks for the reporting. And joining us now with more on this, former Secret Service Chief Psychologist Marissa Randazzo. She co-directed a landmark federal study on school shootings. So, Marissa, thanks for talking with us today. We know this suspect was on law enforcement's radar a year ago for those online threats, but after they interviewed him, they said there was no probable cause for an arrest. Could police have done anything differently?
So in a situation like this, and we still have so much that we're worrying about this, so I don't want a Monday morning quarterback, but I'll tell you that in situations like this, law enforcement often does not have enough to go on. They don't have enough to be able to say, yeah, we can arrest. Oftentimes, even if they have enough to charge, a prosecutor will say, not worth going through prosecution. But in situations like this happens more often than people realize. There is a process that law enforcement can do in partnership with the schools to run something called a behavioral threat assessment to see, does this person pose a threat of violence to others, maybe harm to themselves? And if so, usually that means they're in some sort of crisis, and what can we do to get them out of that crisis? So there are behavioral threat assessment teams, and there are laws across many states that actually require this process in schools now to say, look, we have a student whose behavior is worrying us a lot. There's not enough for law enforcement to charge, and maybe that's not the best way forward anyway. But what can we do to keep an eye on this student, figure out are they in crisis, and then figure out how to help get them off what we call a pathway to violence and onto a better path.
I mean, this suspect is so young, just 14 years old. What do you make of that?
We've seen even younger. Looking at the sort of the entirety of the universe of U.S. school shootings, the youngest we saw was 6. And then the oldest was even people who had graduated or failed to graduate high school and then came back years later to do harm. But what I know about the 14-year-old brain is that that's a time when brains for kids are under construction. They cannot think through consequences the same way that adults can. They literally have an impairment in their brains that it's not built yet, that part of their brain that can think through consequences, which is why we have a juvenile justice system. I'll tell you, there's one school shooting that we studied years ago that occurred quite a long time ago, but was handled strictly through the juvenile justice system. And the person who went through that then came out with a sealed record, and he went on to become a practicing attorney. So there are things that our juvenile justice system is built to do. But I understand that the public outcry in a case like this is for immediate justice, and that the inclination is we want to charge someone as an adult, even though their brain really isn't developed the way our adults are.
Yeah, given this is a juvenile suspect, we know that police did interview the suspect's father a year ago when they had those threats, and he told them his son didn't have unsupervised access to the guns in their house. Under Georgia law, minors cannot possess handguns, but Georgia does not have any laws requiring safe storage. Could the parents here face charges in a case like this?
I don't know Georgia law well enough to know, but we have seen in other states, certainly, parents face charges for failing to take action based on a concern. We certainly saw this in Michigan, in the Oxford, Michigan case, for failing to store or for allowing access. What I know from all the shootings that we've studied is that most of the shooters end up getting their weapons from their own home or a relative's home. And even when guns are stored, they often know how to access them. I'm not placing blame here, but I'm just saying that the access piece is one part of the puzzle. The other is if we can limit access, if we can allow, temporarily take away through something like an extreme risk protection order, or oftentimes local law enforcement will say, look, we're happy to hold the guns for you until we know there is no longer a concern here. So there are options for how to handle situations like this.
How important is the interview with this suspect who was taken into custody, still alive? How important is that going to be for law enforcement, and not just in proceeding with trying this case and gathering evidence, but also learning about what may be done in the future to prevent this kind of action?
One of the things that we did was interview school shooters long after their court cases had ended so that they could talk candidly with us. And we learned a tremendous amount about what had motivated them and what could stop them. This interview right now that he's going through, this is for prosecution. So he will likely have legal representation that is going to limit sort of what can be asked. As a law enforcement investigator, what I would want to know is the threat that came into the school moments before or earlier in the day, that this was going to be the first of 5 schools or multiple school shootings that were to occur, and this was going to be the first, that would be my primary concern, is really finding out, was this student in communication with anyone else at any school, locally, regionally, nationally, internationally? Had there been some contact? Was this part of a group that may have been planning to do something similar at individual schools? That would be my first priority as an investigator, to try to figure out what this student knows and if there was any other risk to any other schools.
Marissa Randazzo, thank you very much for this conversation. Learned so much through this discussion. Up next here on Ana Cabrera Reports, we are heading back to the D.C. courthouse for an update on Donald Trump's election interference case, plus the final countdown to debate day. The rules both sides have now agreed to ahead of that high-stakes showdown.
I wish my TV provider let me choose what I pay for. And pause my subscription when I want and have hundreds of free channels.
Sling lets you do that.
Choose and customize your channel lineup or watch for free. Sling lets you do that.
Whether you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s and beyond, I know you're seeing changes in the skin on your body. Don't panic. It's never too late to transform yourself and your skin. And Crepe Erase is here to do just that.
Crepe Erase has been delivering smoother, firmer, younger-looking skin for almost a decade.
Did you know that Crepe Erase is America's #1 selling anti-aging body treatment system for dry, crepey skin? That's because it works, people.
The Crepe Erase 2-step system is clinically shown to reduce crepey-looking skin the very first time you use it.
I just love my skin. I didn't love it before. I love it now.
And now there's big news. We're introducing the Skin Revitalizing Tool, specially designed to amplify the power of Crepe Erase.
This is the Skin Revitalizing Tool. It is new and it is free. Yes, you heard me right. It's free when you get the product.
Crepe Erase is already an incredible deal at only $49.95. But when you order today, we'll send you the Skin Revitalizing Tool, a $129 value free.
I mean, it's like having a spa in your hand.
And you'll also receive our luxurious neck repair treatment, a $49 value, free.
Since using Crepe Erase, the skin on my neck looks airbrushed. I love it.
These two incredible bonuses are valued together at $178, but they're our free gift to you.
Crepe Erase is something I recommend to my patients because it works.
Don't wait. Get all this, a $247 value for only $49.95, plus free shipping.
If you're not reveling in your younger-looking, soft and sexy skin, just return the bottles, even if they're used up and empty, and we'll give you your money back.
This is a limited-time offer that will not last. Scan the QR code, call, or go to crepeerase.com and order right now.
New projects means new project managers. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. When you sponsor a job, you immediately get your short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria. Visit Indeed.com/hire and get started today.
Unnecessary action hero. Unnecessary.
Was that necessary?
No. Neither's missing your daughter's competition to do payroll.
With Paycom, employees do their own payroll, so you don't have to miss your daughter's big day. Time to shine. Get Paycom and make the unnecessary unnecessary.
Today, where you work isn't as important as how you work. And if you're sitting too much, there is a better way. That's why we created the original Vera desk. It lets people all over the world work happier and healthier. Our newest desks are designed for comfort. They assemble in minutes, and they're guaranteed to last a lifetime. So invest in the best for your home and your health. Save up to 30% during our standing desk sale at Very.com.
Why do couples choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
I need help with their snoring.
Sleep Number does that.
Thank you.
During our biggest sale of the year, save 50% on the Sleep Number limited edition smart bed. Shop now at a Sleep Number store near you.
We need a small business loan fast.
I got this.
Loan cannon!
There's a better way to get a fast small business loan. Go to OnDeck.com, and if approved, get your funds as soon as the same day. Your loan is on deck.
Now let's go to Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz.
These guys are just weird. Robber barons like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump gutted the Midwest.
Your first reaction to the choice of Tim Walz?
Democrats were deflated. Now, game is on.
I think this race is going to get even more interesting.
Morning Joe, weekdays from 6 to 10 on MSNBC.
Back to our breaking news and our top story this morning inside a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C., where lawyers for former President Trump and special counsel Jack Smith are appearing for the first time since the Supreme Court immunity ruling before the judge in this federal election interference case. Right now, they're talking about the schedule for this case and potential next steps. Our legal panel is back with us. I first want to start with NBC's Ken Delaney, who's outside the courthouse. So, Ken, we know that the judge asked multiple questions of Jack Smith's team. What went down? What did we learn?
Anna, we've already learned a lot in about 20 minutes. Judge Tanya Chutkan really moves things along. She's told us that she plans to enter an order on scheduling likely by the end of today, not at this hearing, but later today, which is remarkable when you consider the pace at which Judge Eileen Cannon down in Florida moves on these things. And she also entertained a proposal from the special counsel that he file what she called an evidentiary proffer on the question of immunity and what acts can be included in the indictment, which the special counsel said would include grand jury transcripts and evidence. And then they suggested that there wouldn't be a hearing with witnesses before her, but as our legal expert said earlier, this would be in the form of paper briefs, but it would contain a lot of evidence that the American public hasn't seen yet. And she appears sympathetic to that idea. Now, of course, Donald Trump's lawyers are arguing against it. They're saying it would be prejudicial. They're saying they need to get all kinds of discovery before that paperwork can be allowed to be filed before the public. But she is seeming to be skeptical. And she said at one point, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can get your discovery and we can file this paperwork. That seems to be the direction she's headed in. And if that's true, that will be consequential for the election, because we will see new evidence in this case, which is already a pretty substantial indictment that's been before the public. But now we're going to see what's behind that indictment, potentially, in some cases, the testimony from actual witnesses before a grand jury, other kinds of evidence that could make news and be consequential in the presidential election.
And Ken, as you're speaking, there are questions right now with Trump's lawyers, Judge Chutkan kind of peppering Trump's lawyer, John Lauro, about how he sees things moving forward. I want you to take a look at that Google Doc, and I want to come back to you with the latest details on that specifically, Ken. So feel free to look down while I talk to our legal analysts about what we learned specifically from the Q&A involving the special counsel lawyer, a man by the name of Thomas Wyndham, little-known federal prosecutor, but one of the lead investigators for the Justice Department in this particular case. Is it unusual, Christy, for a judge to call a prosecutor to the stand to answer her questions?
Not at all. This is very standard and routine. And I thought her initial question to the prosecutor Wyndham was, why should we do this in a different order? Usually the indictment's filed, and if there's a challenge to that indictment, a motion to dismiss on any grounds, defense goes first. And what special counsel is saying is, this isn't really an ordinary process here. This is different because of this immunity decision. We really need to go first. We need to kind of lay out why we think our indictment is justified in light of the Supreme Court's decision. We're going to proffer evidence. We're going to have written exhibits. And then we'll give Donald Trump the opportunity to respond. He's saying he wants discovery. Well, we've produced discovery, but we're going to lay out all our cards here in this brief, and then he can respond to it. Then you can have the benefit of all of that briefing, and then, Judge, you can decide, do you need a hearing? Do you need to hear from witnesses? Do you need more once you have the benefit of all those papers?
Barb, what do you make, or your take on what we're hearing in this court hearing so far?
I think this is going exactly as we would have expected it to. You know, in the briefs that were filed before this hearing, Jack Smith laid out what he wanted to do in terms of proceeding on the papers, submitting the evidence, and Donald Trump made it clear that his goal was delay, delay, delay. And we're hearing more of the same today. As Christy pointed out, I want discovery. There isn't more evidence. There is now less. And so they have all of the material that they need to go forward. It's really the courtroom equivalent of saying, my dog ate my homework. I think that certainly Judge Chutkan will give the Trump lawyers an opportunity to speak their mind. But I think by the end of the day, what we are going to see is a briefing schedule, giving the government a deadline to submit its brief, giving the Trump lawyers a deadline to submit their response, and then the government a chance for a reply brief, and then a hearing date that gets set. The real question I'll be looking for later today is whether that date is before Election Day.
Ken, as this hearing continues with John Lauro representing Donald Trump now facing these questions from Judge Chutkan, what is he having to answer to?
Yeah, well, as Christy and Barb said, John Lauro is pressing for delay. He's asking in any way he can to postpone this thing. And what Judge Chutkan said was interesting. She said, as I read it, the Supreme Court ruling requires us to deal with immunity forthwith, meaning immediately. Under your schedule, we wouldn't even begin briefing immunity until December. Why? And we don't have his answer yet on the Google Doc I'm looking at. But essentially, she is saying we need to move this along. We need to deal with this question of what our official acts, what the Supreme Court ruling allows in this case and what it disqualifies, and we need to have evidence on that before her, and she's going to make a decision. And another thing that the special counsel said is, we know there's going to be an interlocutory appeal, meaning an appeal of whatever Judge Chutkan decides up to potentially all the way to the Supreme Court. But we only want one, he's saying, because we want to delay this as little as possible. So let's craft this so that whatever Donald Trump's side is appealing, it's going to be in one appeal so we can get it done. Obviously, this is only relevant if Donald Trump loses the election, because as we established earlier, if he wins, he can make these cases go away. But if he loses, the special counsel is trying to craft a path forward to win this case in spite of the immunity decision by the Supreme Court.
Christy, as I'm reading the notes being inserted into this Google document in real time, it almost sounds like Donald Trump's lawyers are asking for some kind of a mini trial almost before deciding how to proceed, because Judge Chutkan asks, so you want witnesses and testimony and cross-examination? Lauro says, ultimately, we want that, but first we have to deal with these issues. We want a process, he says, where we're entitled to full and fair discovery, and then we go first and argue our motion to dismiss. We feel Your Honor is going to dismiss this indictment after you hear from us in our motion papers. So what do you make of that?
So I found this to be a very odd argument that they made in their joint report, status report to the court, and it seems like he's now making it to the judge, where he says, essentially, we should have the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses. It would be prejudicial to Donald Trump for the special counsel to submit this brief with exhibits and, written proffers, examples of what their evidence is without us getting an opportunity to present our own witnesses and cross-examine theirs. Well, that sounds like you're asking for this mini trial, which it seems like would not be in Donald Trump's interest, particularly before the election. So I don't think that's where Judge Chutkan is going to go. I think she is going to follow what the special counsel is offering, which is lay it all out in writing, and then if I need that hearing, if I need to hear from witnesses, if you want to present witnesses as well, then we can get there. But let me just lay out all the cards first, and let's see where we are. I mean, one thing I will say is it is a breath of fresh air. These are the kinds of questions you would expect a judge to ask to keep things on track, to try to keep things moving along, to stop that kind of delay. So different from what we saw from Judge Cannon, where it was was a lot of questions and then just putting off making a decision. The fact that she's saying you're getting an order from me today means she's keeping this moving.
And Barb, she says, let's discuss the sensitive time. I've said before, the election is not relevant here. The court is not concerned with the electoral schedule, she said. That's a direct quote. And she says if you're talking about timing of legal issues with relation to when the election is, that's not something I'm going to consider. Quote, oh, I'm definitely not getting drawn into an election dispute. What's your reaction to that, Barb?
Yeah, I think she's made it clear all along that she is going to keep this case on trial and not be dissuaded in any way by the election schedule. And I think one thing to remember is when people are concerned about whether this might in some way have some influence on the election, it is not just a defendant who has a right to a speedy trial. The public also has a right to a speedy trial, and a judge is obligated to advance that right in due course. And so for her to sit back and say, we're just going to let this election play out and then we'll pick up where we left off, would be to violate that statutory and constitutional right. And the other thing I want to point out is, both Ken and Christy have said, and I completely agree, that if Donald Trump is elected in November, he will order his Department of Justice to dismiss this case. I want to just pause and recognize just how extraordinary that statement is. We are assuming that Donald Trump will direct his Justice Department to kill a legitimate case. That would have been unthinkable just in 2017 when Donald Trump was president and Robert Mueller was investigating his case. But now he is empowered by the Supreme Court's immunity decision to direct his Department of Justice to do anything, even that which is illegal.
Barb, real quick, when you talk about moving forward in this case, despite the election around the corner, help us understand why that would be appropriate when in the past we've talked about sort of this rule with the Justice Department not taking actions that could potentially influence an election within a certain timetable. Here we are just 2 months from the election.
Yeah, so the Department of Justice has, it's really an unwritten policy. It is a practice that within about 60 days of an election, it should not initiate new criminal charges. And that's because in 60 days, there's not really an opportunity for a defendant to defend him or herself. So if, for example, you conduct a search at their home on the eve of the election, it suggests that there is some sort of cloud of suspicion over this person. Or if you file an indictment on the eve of an indictment, it could have an effect on the electorate. This is a case that has been pending for well over a year. And so in this instance, to stop everything just because there is an election going on would really be to put the cart before the horse. This case has been proceeding. The Justice Department did file well in advance of trial, and the court is simply advancing that public's right to a speedy trial.
Okay, thank you, Ken Delanian, Barbara McQuaid, and Christy Greenberg. Please stay close. We continue to follow the hearing, now about 40 minutes underway. Up next on Ana Cabrera Reports, another clue that we are in uncharted political territory. A Cheney has endorsed a Democrat. Could it move Republican voters hesitant to go blue?
Hi, I'm Dr. Boyer. I'm a chiropractic physician. Early on in my practice, I was introduced to Balance of Nature. What an amazing product. I love it. I love what it has done for me, and I know what it has done for my patients. It is the best product that I have ever come across.
Start your journey with Balance of Nature supplements. Get 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee and free shipping. Don't wait any longer. Use discount code LOVE.
Ever worry that you're drinking too much? Take back control with Or Health. Or Health provides access to medication proven to make it easier to drink less or to quit drinking altogether. Qualify for treatment today at orhealth.com.
What's a great place to find affordable luxury for less? There's beautiful linen sheets, there's gorgeous curtains, whatever your style is. The quality for what you get is really substantial, and that's one of the reasons that I've been drawn to this brand.
Get $20 off your first purchase at quince.com.
If you're feeling out of step with your current big wireless plan, switch to Consumer Cellular.
Switch!
All the dips is the price. Ow, ow, ow. Storm. With plans starting at just $20, it's easy to switch to Consumer Cellular.
Emergency crystals pop and fizz when you throw them back. And who doesn't love a good throwback? Now with vitamin D for the dark days of winter.
Do you owe money to the IRS? Listen to how Optima Tax Relief helped these people put their tax debt to rest.
I got into a financial pickle with my back taxes.
I owed the IRS $66,000.
It's a horrible feeling. You know, at some point in time, I knew the IRS was going to be coming looking for me.
I was paralyzed with fear.
Optima got me a settlement with the IRS.
The team at Optima Tax Relief settled my IRS tax bill.
It was every bit of a new lease on life for me to be able to get that burden off my shoulders.
They really cleared the path for me to have a fresh start, and I will be forever grateful.
And I'm still amazed. I tell the story, people do not believe me, and I have paperwork to prove it.
For your free consultation, call 800-357-8365. That's 800-357-8365.
Optima Tax Relief.
Can you believe it? Election Day is exactly 2 months away. And the first and possibly only debate is just about 5 days out. The rules for that ABC News face-off have finally been set, including the controversial muted microphones. Former President Trump is already claiming he won't be treated fairly that night. Today, he'll speak at an economic luncheon in New York. Meantime, Vice President Harris picks up her debate prep on the trail in Pittsburgh. And last night, she picked up a prominent Republican backer.
As a conservative, as someone who believes in and cares about the Constitution, I have thought deeply about this. And because of the danger that Donald Trump poses, not only am I not voting for Donald Trump, but I will be voting for Kamala Harris.
Joining us now, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard awaiting Trump's remarks, and Republican strategist Susan Del Percio and Democratic strategist Basil Smikle. They're both MSNBC political analysts. Vaughn, Trump and Vice President Harris finally agreed to the debate rules. What are we learning?
Right, we're learning that the debate rules are going to look a lot like they did for the Joe Biden-Donald Trump debates that we saw back in June. And after some back and forth, ultimately the Harris campaign agreeing to the original terms that were put forward by the Trump campaign. And ABC releasing those terms. In part, there are no pre-written notes that are allowed for a response. Each individual candidate will have 2 minutes. And for their rebuttal, they'll have an additional 2 minutes. And then there is also the muted mic situation. When a candidate's time is up, their mic will turn to mute. And so for the campaigns, they should expect a debate to look like that of the one that we saw in June here. And of course, when we're looking at the dynamics of this is different than we have historically seen in presidential debates. And so we should not expect at least as the public, to hear any interruptions from one candidate over the other. But this was a lot of finagling back and forth. Of course, Donald Trump over the last 24 hours has made claims that are not substantiated, including the idea that he is putting into the right-wing media ecosystem that the ABC is going to be providing questions and answers to Kamala Harris. Of course, there is no credence to that, yet Donald Trump is speaking those words. And so we are now less than a week until that debate here. There was, of course, last night set to be potentially a debate that was going to be hosted by Fox. Of course, Kamala Harris's campaign did not agree to that, so instead Donald Trump appeared for what was billed as a town hall with Sean Hannity.
And Vaughn, any reaction from Team Trump to Liz Cheney's endorsement of Vice President Harris?
We're waiting to hear directly from Donald Trump specifically. J.D. Vance, though, last night while out in Arizona did respond, saying that the campaign had no interest in the endorsement of Liz Cheney, suggesting that it was people like her who were responsible for American troops losing their lives in war, and that she represented a Republican Party that was no longer Trump's Republican Party. And so, of course, Liz Cheney, who helped helm the January 6th Select Committee efforts, has been very vocal ever since leaving Congress that Donald Trump should be nowhere near the White House. And as you heard last night there, indicating that she will be voting for Kamala Harris, which is a striking difference in tenor coming from her compared to 4 years ago when Kamala Harris was selected by Joe Biden to be the VP running mate. She had sent out a statement at the time that was quite vocal in her opposition to Kamala Harris as a political figure. A lot has changed, though, in 4 years. Anna?
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you. Susan, do you see this Cheney announcement changing any minds? I'm thinking maybe Nikki Nikki Haley supporters?
What it'll probably do is act more like a permission slip to those Republicans who weren't going to vote for Trump but were going to stay home. That's what I think, that's where the movement may go, is that she's not certainly changing independents or right-leaning or moderates even, but she can get some people out there maybe to say, wow, I really never saw myself doing this, but I will actually go out and vote for the vice president.
And also, she talked about, doing that, what you just said, versus writing in sort of protest vote, right? Somebody whose vote won't make a difference when it's just the matchup between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Basil, Trump has said he doesn't need more voters. Should his team be worried about Harris pulling some of these votes in that are on the margins?
Well, he may feel confident that his base is secure, but we're not talking about either candidate's base. We're talking about some of those persuadable voters in a handful of states that may have stayed home were it not maybe for a Liz Cheney endorsement, an open endorsement and proactive endorsement. So I agree with what Susan said. What we're looking at here is the ability for Kamala Harris to create a coalition that, if for no other reason in history, before or after this election, that they come together to do this one thing, and that's vote for Kamala Harris for the presidency. So when I always say that campaigns are additive, you're supposed to grow your base beyond, what you started with. That's what Donald Trump is not doing. He seems to double down on policies that shrink his base, and that's where an endorsement of Liz Cheney's actually helps.
But Joe Biden had that coalition, too. He had a significant, well, not significant, but the Republicans that voted for Joe Biden in 2020, this is, maybe they're not happy with Harris, but they will, that's where the Cheney endorsement can be there. It's more, I think, of a continuation of the coalition of 2020.
Guys, let's look ahead to the debate. There's a lot of anticipation for it. We all know what a debate can do for a race. Look at what happened last time around and how much has changed because of that debate. And since then, we have the ground rules now, including the muted microphones, which both sides have agreed to. Now, Susan, do you see that being a big factor? We know Kamala Harris didn't want to agree to that rule.
Well, that's because it serves the vice president very well to be able to come back and make her points. She's very good at, at the get-go coming out. But at the end of the day, she's so disciplined and knows how to manage her time and her words that I think she'll be able to watch the clock, deliver the shot she wants to, whereas Donald Trump will just get flat out cut off.
Well, Donald Trump isn't happy already. Ahead of the debate, he's maybe trying to lower expectations, claiming that the deck is stacked against him. Here he was with Fox's Sean Hannity last night. Take a look.
I think a lot of people are going to be watching to see how nasty they are, how unfair they are. I agreed to do it because they wouldn't do any other network. The other thing is, her best friend is the head of the network. Her husband's best friend is married to the head of the network. And they're going to get the questions. I've already heard they're going to get the questions in advance.
To be clear, ABC came out today and really directly refuted that, saying no topics or questions will be shared in advance with campaigns or the candidates. But Basil, what do you think he's trying to do there?
Oh, it's his go-to move. I'm going to make sure that people think that there's no legitimacy to what's about to happen. That is his go-to move. But what I also found interesting is that he did this with Sean Hannity in front of an audience. That's also his go-to move. He loves that. He feeds off of that. This debate will not have an audience. So it gives actually Kamala Harris an opportunity to further make him the outlier that she has worked so hard to try to make him in this last couple of weeks. Make him that outlier, make him the person that does not do well, standing up to someone with the kind of credibility that she has, and you don't get the applause reaction from the crowd to legitimize his comments. So delegitimize him, make him seem small, make him seem petty. I think the kind of discipline that she has, it creates that juxtaposition very well.
Basil Smikle, Susan Del Percio, good to see you guys. Thanks so much. Next here on Ana Cabrera Reports, more on the courtroom campaign trail. Collision happening today. We're turning back to D.C. and the courthouse for more new details on the Trump election interference case hearing happening right now.
From this can't miss moment to this hello new grandpa moment,
to that whatever this is moment. Your moments are worth protecting against RSV. If you're 75 or older, or 60 or older with certain chronic conditions, you're at higher risk of being hospitalized from RSV. And there are no prescription RSV treatments. You have options. Ask your doctor about Pfizer's RSV vaccine. Because moments like these matter.
You've got your Sunday obsession, and we got you. Now with Verizon, get NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube TV on us. And a great deal on Galaxy Z Fold 6 for a total value of $1,250. Only on Verizon.
See you Sunday.
You founded your kayak company because you love the ocean, not spreadsheets. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Indeed Instant Match instantly delivers quality candidates matching your job description. Visit Indeed.com/hire.
Most people call leaf filter when their gutters are clogged and they notice one of the many issues that can bring. Well, sometimes it's the smell of mildew when water has seeped into the interior walls, or maybe they've spotted mold in the attic. But most often, it's the more obvious signs of damage, like rotten soffit, fascia, or water pooling near their foundation. You can get ahead of costly damage by protecting your home's gutters today. We're in your neighborhood and ready to help.
Schedule your free gutter inspection today. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com.
This bakery needs new equipment fast to keep up with demand. So they're going to OnDeck, the online lender that makes it easy to choose your loan and, if approved, get funds as soon as the same day. Your loan is on deck.
I need Q1 full index reports to my desk by noon, complete with comprehensive data analysis.
Are you getting any of this?
Charles.
Yeah, Otter's got the meeting notes. I'll ask it for action items in the channel.
Marketing team.
And Maria already asked for a budget reminder. Smart.
Judge Mom by morning. Got it?
Got it, boss. Otter, you got this.
I've always loved election nights. Every election night reveals a story about the candidates, about the campaign that we just watched, but it reveals a story about the voters who decided the election, what mattered to them, what didn't matter to them, what they prioritized. The presidential election is America's family photo. We take one every 4 years, and we can look back over time and we can see who and what the country was and where it was just on the presidential election.
The NFL is coming back with a 1-2 punch. It's kickoff Thursday, Ravens-Chiefs.
Everything you got!
And on Friday, from Brazil, it's Packers-Eagles, only on Peacock. 2 nights, back-to-back, on NBC and Peacock.
Democracy is egalitarian, which means it's for everyone. But it also, I think, is a divinely inspired gift of our forefathers to show us that we can lead ourselves.
We are back with the very latest from the D.C. courtroom, where Judge Tanya Chutkan's working on scheduling issues in former President Trump's election interference case. Trump's team pushing for more delays because of the election. Judge Chutkan saying the election isn't relevant to their work. And back with us, NBC's Ken Delanian and former federal prosecutor Christy Greenberg. Ken, bring us up to speed. What's the very latest?
Anna, there was a fascinating exchange that goes right to the theme you mentioned. It really speaks to how Judge Chutkan approaches this case. John Lauro, the lawyer for Donald Trump, at one point said, "We're talking about the presidency of the United States." And Judge Chutkan responded, "I'm not talking about the presidency. I'm talking about a 4-count indictment." And she added, "It strikes me that what you're trying to do is affect the presentation of evidence in this case so as not to impinge on an election." And later, when John Lauro got back up to respond to the special counsel, she said, "I don't want to hear any more rhetoric about the election." So she's making very clear here, in contrast to Judge Eileen Cannon, who seemed to suggest that Donald Trump had to be treated differently because he was the former president running for president. Judge Chutkan's approach is that that has absolutely nothing to do with these criminal proceedings and shouldn't affect it. Now, on substance, what they're arguing about is this question of Donald Trump's interactions with Vice President Pence and urging Pence to delay the certification of votes. Trump's team wants that to be the subject of a separate motion to dismiss because it believes that the Supreme Court clearly said that that was out of bounds in the immunity decision. The special counsel is responding that that's not at all what the Supreme Court decision says, that this is a matter of dispute. They've left that in the indictment because they argue that Mike Pence was actually acting as the president
It really doesn't make sense to me. This argument that Trump's lawyer is making that if you decide that the Pence piece of the indictment goes away, then the whole indictment goes away. That's just wrong. There are multiple other schemes here. The fake elector scheme, his pressure campaign of state officials that had nothing to do with the Mike Pence conversations. So even if Judge Chutkan agrees, hey, yeah, these seem like official acts where there's immunity, there's a whole lot of other allegations in the indictment that could still remain. So his argument here is just flawed.
So the special counsel will be tasked then to come up with what's official and what's not and present that right and to convince the judge that their view is right. How complicated could that be?
It's very complicated, and the Supreme Court said as much, said this is going to be really challenging for you, and didn't really provide a whole lot of guidance for poor Judge Chutkan as to how she's going to do this. But the one thing that it's clear to me from the readout that we're getting from the court is that Judge Chutkan is having paying no mind to any of these delay tactics. She is saying, let's get this forward with it. There have been delays of over a year here while we've been waiting for this to work its way through the appeals. We are by no means sprinting towards the finish line here, but we do need to move this case forward. So again, I expect the order from her today will set this briefing schedule, and I don't think Donald Trump's very transparent delay tactics are working.
There's now a discussion about the legitimacy of Jack Smith's appointment. Judge Chutkan saying to Donald Trump's lawyer, John Lauro, you didn't challenge Smith's appointment earlier in this case, so why now? Lauro's pointing to Justice Clarence Thomas's concurrence in the ruling that was cited by Judge Eileen Cannon for dismissing that separate case by Jack Smith, the one down in Florida involving the Mar-a-Lago classified documents. So do you see this argument and this path now working for him in Judge Chutkan's courtroom?
Judge Chutkan is asking the exact right question. If this was such a good argument that the special counsel was improperly appointed by the Attorney General, why didn't you make it before? It has nothing to do with immunity. You made a bunch of different motions to dismiss on a number of different grounds. Why didn't you make it before? And the reason is clear, because it's a loser.
But Justice Clarence Thomas apparently suggested it could be a legitimate motion to make.
He did. And by the way, he did that without the benefit of any briefing. Neither party, not even Trump, had raised this argument before Justice Thomas. And he took it upon himself to just decide in concurrence that this was an issue when it hadn't even been briefed. That is highly irregular and really improper.
Okay, Christy Greenberg, I have 1,000 more questions for you. Always. Thank you for being here. But that's going to do it for us today. I'm going to hand it off to my friend and colleague, Jose Diaz-Balart, who picks up our coverage right now.
Good morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart, and we begin with breaking news on the legal drama surrounding former President Donald Trump. Right now, a federal judge in Washington is holding a hearing in Trump's federal election interference case. The first hearing in this case in nearly a year. Trump is not attending today's hearing. His lawyers entered a not guilty plea on his behalf to a revised version of the indictment that was filed last week. Now, today's hearing comes just over 2 months after the U.S. Supreme Court's landmark ruling that former presidents have broad immunity from prosecution for official acts. Judge Chutkan is expected to lay out a schedule for how the proceedings will take shape over the next couple of months. With us now, NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian, Katie Phang, MSNBC legal contributor and host of The Katie Phang Show, Saturdays here on MSNBC, and Maya Wiley, former assistant U.S. attorney, who is now president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. So, Ken, what has been happening in that courtroom so far?
Well, Jose, first I'll tell you about the atmospherics and tone,